Go.
Hello, welcome to a lesson before writing, episode 33. And Ted Morrissey here with my co hosts, Grant Tracey. And Grant's most recent book we've published is Shoeshine Kill, his fourth Hayden Fuller novel, although he's already sent me number 5. So we got to start working on that pretty darn soon here. Also here with Brady Harrison, and this is Brady's novel A Journey to Al Ramel, which came out about 6 months ago, or maybe a little longer than that, but also available in paperback. I've only got the hardcover editions. I have ordered, more editions of your books. They just haven't arrived yet because I've been sending them out, and then we ended up selling a bunch of them in Baltimore, which we'll talk more about. But I will mention my new book, Aspiring Child, a biography of Mary W. Shelley in sonnets, which has been doing amazingly well. I mean, everything's relative, but my actual official book launch and reading will be April 20th and 21st. It's not going to be that long of a reading. It's just that the National University of Modern Languages in Islamabad, Pakistan, is hosting the reading because I have friends and colleagues out there who've generously offered to do that. So it'll be 9:30 a.m. in Islamabad and 11:30 at night the night before here in central United States. So any night owls out there want to see it live, we can arrange that. Otherwise, I'll get a hold of the recording and post that. So, yeah, my gosh, it's been a busy March. Holy cow. It just seems like it's a long month, but a lot of stuff has been happening. Brady and I were in Baltimore at the beginning of the month for AWP Conference and Bookfair. I know we want to debrief more about that. But first, Grant, you had a busy beginning of your month too. You had film festival screenings of your movie. You were in a Neil Simon play. I mean, bring us up to speed. How'd all that turn out?
Oh, that it turned out real well. Yeah, I got to play Iris Stone, and it's a great part for me, because it's a guy who's a sketch writer, and has some talent as a comic, but he also has lots of doubts about himself. So I could like really relate to that. And he's got this need to be loved, which was a really interesting facet to his character. So uh, it's probably one of my most favorite plays I've ever been in, and the cast was great. The director was amazing, and like was able to call you on your shit, when like at least with me, like we've done a lot of stuff together, so he would know when something I did what sucked. He even said that one time, Grant, that sucked, and so I'm like, okay, all right. So that it's like just when you just when you just go, you're great. He says, but when you think about it too much and you think I'm going to be clever, you suck. And that sucked. I'm like, okay, all right, I got it, got the note taken. So anyway, so it was great working with him because, like I said, he knows me real well, knows when I'm on and when I'm not, when I'm manufacturing something instead of just letting it be organic. So that was great. And then, the film festivals, fantastic. I couldn't get to the second one because it was the same time as the first one. I didn't expect to get them both, okay? And then I got them both, and they both, So, but I did go up to Decorah for the Aniata one, and that was fantastic. It was nice to be in with a bunch of folks that appreciate cinema and were asking really intelligent questions, and I got to answer, a Q&A afterwards, and that was really, really cool. And yeah, so excited, things going well. My writing's, I'm back in the pocket with that, so life's good. Well, the world at large ain't so good right now, but the writing's going well.
Right, right. Well, you've got another film thing coming up. Is it in the spring or summer? You're gonna go to like what, North Carolina or
Yeah.
something?
Yeah,
Or
my buddy Craig Fisher, going back to my Illinois days. Hey, the Illini, way to go, guys. Way to go, boys. My buddy Craig Fisher invited me out. He's at Boone, North Carolina. There's a small theater that he does indie stuff at, and my film's going to be showing there in November. I can't remember the
oh,
exact date, sixth
yeah.
or seventh, something like. But I'll let you all know when we get closer to it. But I told him, hey, okay, I'd be glad to come on. I said, oh, wasn't even thinking. I said, yeah. He said, okay. So, yeah, I'm going to go up there and see him and Kath and um, do the do the indie show thing. So he's going to pair me with some kind of Western. I can't remember if he called it a samurai Western or a spaghetti Western or some kind of Western. So I'm like, yeah, I'm on for that. That sounds great. So we're gonna be double billed. It sounds cool.
Interesting, interesting. Okay. Well, Brady, I know you've been just on the run in general, and you got to stay in Baltimore longer than planned. Your flight kept getting canceled. So you were stuck in Baltimore after AWP a couple of additional days. But I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't, frankly, anticipate having a great time in Baltimore at AWP, but I actually did. I actually really enjoyed hanging out at the table and meeting people, and I ended up doing some interviews with some folks, which I posted to the podcast as a bonus episodes 11A, 11B, and 11C. I'm not going to win any awards for sound mixing because it was so difficult to record in the cavernous book fair hall. But nevertheless, I think they turned out pretty cool. I was glad to get to know some people. But I think you had a pretty positive experience in Baltimore too, other than your inability to actually leave it.
Yeah, no, trying to get home was yeah, a nightmare. I never really had the good fortune to get stuck somewhere, and it wasn't in the very cool hotel downtown that I stayed at during the conference, but some hotel that the airport put me up at near the airport. So, that part was so depressing. But however, that doesn't matter because the AWP, contrary to what you guys had sort of made me think that it was going to be absolutely miserable. I had a blast. It was so much fun. There was so much good energy. There were so many people. And it's true that that space was cavernous, but it held so much. And there were young people and seasoned veterans and literary journals and publishers and presses and agents and talked to so many amazing people. And it was very fun. So yeah, getting home, not fun, but being there and then hanging out. And Ted and I managed to find one really good restaurant and had a really great crab cake. So that made it all. Everything else,
Most.
everything else pales. It doesn't matter after that. It was so good.
Yeah, yeah. No, I had a great time too. The other thing that made it pretty great was we did a really terrific job moving our books. You sold out, I think, of every copy of both the Journey to El Ramel and The Term Between. I sold out of most of the copies of the books I brought, but the two reading or book signings, I guess, that I had at the table both sold out. And then we brought some of Grant's books, even though we were mad at him for not going to Baltimore. But no, we brought all the Haydens with us that I could pack in my suitcase and sold out of all of those. And no, and and of course, maybe 30 years from now, we'll look back in episode 623, and we'll say, gosh, that was really a banner year at AWP. It was never like that again. But I kind of want to believe that the success we had, and it wasn't just our books. I mean, I brought a bunch of the press's books, and we sold a bunch of those as well. We finally had like discriminating readers that we were actually being able to connect with. I think that's the problem that so many of us more serious minded authors have. It's just hard to cut through the typical kind of Barnes and Noble, Amazon front page algorithm nonsense. And, we're not getting in the New York Times book reviews. So it's hard for readers who are looking for more serious minded material to actually encounter it. So once they do, they're actually pretty eager to pick it up and pay you $5 for it or whatever, and hopefully read it. So it does give me some hope that there are still some discriminating readers out there. It's just the tricky part is somehow getting your books in their hands. I don't know. Does that takeaway seem fair, Brady, or would you kind of assess the books we moved in Baltimore in a different light?
No, I think that sounds right. And it was so much fun. So not only had the opportunity to see some old friends and to talk to people at journals like North American Review and Slab happened to be next door to us, and so talked to those folks. But also had so much fun talking with folks who were buying our books. It was so much, so you'll forgive me, but it was so much fun for me to be there as part of 12 Winters Press. And so I was having so much fun. I was talking about Grant's books. I mean, it's true. Grant wasn't there, and so Ted and I were saying really terrible things about him. But anyway, but still, it was so much fun to talk about the books. And then when you see, sorry, I'm getting all excited again. But when you see the range of books that 12 Winters has published, from illustrated children's books that were selling great, and then you get to brag on Grant and the Hayden Fuller mysteries and say, look at this whole series that's so great, and there will be more. And then the literary fiction, and there was even that dirty book. So yeah, it was a blast, and people were really happy to talk with us.
Yeah.
Like, right, as writers, writer to writer, or writer to interested reader. That was really great, and and it happened kind of across the course of the several days. And so yeah, it had the signing, but people were stopping by all the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
it rocked. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, I got a lot of positive vibes. A lot of people just want to hear about the press, and they want to know about the origin of 12 Winters and where did that come from. They thought it was really cool, so I was happy to explain the connection there. I think I said in our last episode when I wasn't feeling quite as positive a vibe about AWP, I did acknowledge that maybe one of the differences is the last time I'd gone to AWP, which was like 13 years previously, I didn't have a book published yet. And I think there was a lot of envy and jealousy going on in my psyche because I was going around, all these other people had their books out and they were doing signings and blah 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 blah. And I had books, had manuscripts. I just couldn't. It was one of the things I think that sparked my wanting to start 12 Winters and start publishing my own stuff. But also I knew so many authors who were in a similar boat that I wanted to start bringing some of them along for the ride. And so that's been really great because we did have several people stop by the table who, had manuscripts, and they were looking for a publisher. I was just honest with them and told them I kind of had more than I knew what to do with at the moment. I did mention that we had 12 Winters Journal and 12 Winters Miscellany that are online publications, and please send us some stuff there. And on a few occasions, I've been in the biz long enough that I did know of a publisher here or there that seemed to maybe have an interest in the kind of thing they were shopping. So I was able to hopefully give them a lead or two that they could follow up on, and maybe that's going to, come to some fruition. So I do think it makes a big difference kind of where you're at in your writing career. So I got to share this story though. Talk about perseverance. There was one woman who stopped by the table and we were talking and she let me know that she had published her first novel this previous spring or previous fall rather, with a small press, and she was telling me about it. Because she also shared the fact that she wrote it while she was at the Iowa Writers Workshop in the 1970s. It took her 50 years to find a publisher for her novel. She said, I worked on it now and again. I got some positive rejections now and again. And she's published other things in the meantime, but she stuck with this. Her thesis director was John Irving. And then she also knew Kent Harif, who was my thesis director, because he went to the Iowa Writers Workshop. So anyway, there's really 6 degrees of separation thing going on. But I just was so amazed that she stuck with this manuscript for 50 years before she found a publisher. And she didn't like paint herself as some sort of victim, or she was just very happy to have it out in the world and wanted to let me know that her book was out there. And so that's some kind of record of perseverance, I would think, right there. So, yeah, I don't know. Did you have any favorite stories, Brady, that anyone shared with you while you were there in Baltimore that you would want to rely on? Really putting you on the spot here, but
Oh yeah, no. Well, it was so much fun, and I enjoyed talking with. I mean, of course, I don't represent the press. I just happen to be behind the table, doing my part to try to sell some books and promote the press. But people would stop by, like maybe you and Melissa were off to lunch, and people would stop by and what is the press publishing? And it's above my pay grade. But it was really great to talk with those folks. They're working and doing exciting things, and they're out there trying to find homes for their work. And so that was great. And then I talked to a couple of people. I mean, this is, it's such a big and thriving scene. I talked to a couple of people that had scripts under contract that were in the pre-production stages, and that was pretty exciting. And there was this young guy. He gave me his bookmark. He wrote this thriller that's being developed also into a movie, and yeah, those conversations were great. So, and there were lots of those. Nothing quite as dramatic as the one that you shared, but yeah, I talked to a screenwriter, and yeah, it just there's a whole world going on out there. It was good.
Right, right. Well, I also stopped by, of course, and talked a little bit with North American Review, Short Story Magazine folks. Jeremy Schraffenberger in particular, and that kind of thing. And so again, that was really fun. And I know, Grant, you've mentioned that when you did go to AWP, that one of your biggest thrills is when people came by the North American Review table who you had published. And I had that happen a couple of times. A couple of authors we've published through the journal stopped by the table. Of course, they're super grateful and super great to get to know them. I know you didn't go to AWP, obviously, Grant, but did you get any debriefing from your friends and neighbors who did go, and anything they had to say about the conference?
Um, oh, they enjoyed it. They had a good students that went, fantastic experience. Um, I know Jeremy had a great time. He met a bunch of folks. Rachel unfortunately didn't get to go. She was late getting to the airport, and they closed the door on the airplane. And by the time she was going to get a second flight, and by the time that would have got her connected to where she had to be, her panel would have been over.
Oh, geez.
So yeah, it's just the flight left really early in the morning, and she got there 40 minutes before the flight, but you have to be there 45 minutes before, and they it was so anyway. Some nightmare stories there, but everyone that went, besides Emily getting stuck with the pro card bill, everybody that went had a blast. So yeah. So anyway, that's my tale. And I wasn't there, but um, yeah. Sorry to put a damper on things, but this is the world we live in.
Right. Well, I didn't get to any of the panels, and I have in the past gone to a few, but partly I was having such a stellar time hanging out at the table, especially with Brady there, and like he said, talking to folks who came by, and also, quite honestly, they won't print a program anymore. So you've got to look at your phone to try to figure out what's happening where. And a couple of times, like at breakfast, I thought, well, I'll try and go through the program on my phone and see what's happening. And it was like, you know what? No, I don't enjoy this at all. That's what, I'm all for trying to save paper and stuff. I get it. But yet at the same time, I think there's a big difference between having a program app that you have to look at your phone or tablet or something versus having an actual printed program. I know we've talked about this before, and I probably sound like I'm 150 years old every time I say how much I like having a printed program. But when I went to the Louisville conference the last couple of times, because they had gone to that business of not having a printed program, I would go like a couple of days before on my home computer, and I would download the program and print it out and staple it together and take it to the conference. Oh my gosh, I was like the most popular dude at the conference. People would say, "Where did you get that? And can I see that for a second?" And I should have printed like 50 and charged $10 a program or something. I could have made all kinds of money. But I think, AWP turned out a lot better than I anticipated. It's going to be in Chicago next year, which of course is my stomping ground. So I think I could be talked into going to AWP in Chicago next year. Grant, do
Yes.
not quadruple book yourself for
No,
AWP.
we're talking about getting a coach, like a bus, and taking a bunch of people up there, and yeah. So that's in the early works and early designs. I've been
Well, I'm
trying
gonna.
to think of a panel to do or to offer, and I don't know. I was so disappointed when I didn't get into LA. And I put so much work into it. I don't feel like putting all that effort in to be told no again. But I understand
Yeah.
the LA thing and I had some pretty heavy hitters on my panel, like Gary Phillips, who's a really great writer of crime noir, Soho Press. Um, and so I don't know. Maybe I probably will just go. I don't know if I'm going to try to work up a panel proposal or not.
Yeah, we did, this past time and it wasn't accepted. I don't care. I don't I don't have a burning desire to do something like that. There were like they said there were some 13,000 participants at AWP this year. I mean, the last time I went, it was a mere 10,000. So they've expanded. So yeah, I'm sure that a goodly percentage of those 13,000 people are submitting panel proposals. So there's just no way that they're going to be able. And I know it seems like in the past they like to have a certain number of panels be sort of geographically thematical. So in other words, like since they were in Baltimore, people who propose, panels that had something to do with Baltimore or Baltimore-based authors or something like that, they got probably a better chance of getting in. And with us going to Chicago, I know the last couple of times I've been to AWP, which was in Chicago, there were a bunch of Chicago-themed panels but again, yeah, I don't have a burning desire to do that kind of thing. Maybe if you guys come up with a really great idea, I could be talked into putting something together, but otherwise, not so much. But yeah, no, I think it was good. And I've kind of talked about this before, but it really puts into perspective why it's so competitive to get stories and poems and things accepted, because you hear, gosh, journals only accept 0.1% of the submissions they get, and obviously trying to get a book into the world is even more competitive. So when you're around like 13,000 people, all of whom are really dedicated and talented writers, and then you kind of do this Venn diagram thing. As you guys know, I've been to the International Conference on the Short Story in English the last two times it was held in Singapore and Killarney. Several hundred people there in each instance, and so that really brings into focus, it's not just folks in like the US and in England who are writing in English, but people all over the world are writing in English. So you've got, all these talented writers basically on every continent on the globe submitting material in English. And you've got all these people in the United States and Canada, et cetera, who are writing in English. And then you throw in the ever shrinking number of readers, particularly of serious fiction. And again, it does really encapsulate and how competitive it is. And I guess therefore we should feel even better about our few victories that we do have in terms of getting work out there in the world and that kind of thing. I don't know, Brady, did you have any thoughts regarding those? Did it kind of like underscore just how many talented writers there are in the world, or did you have any thoughts like that while you were milling around among the 13,000?
Yeah, no, I was just having so much fun. I wasn't even really thinking about it in those terms. But I do want to say before we move on, before we get too far away from this. So not only were Ted and I talking smack about Grant, but when I went over to the North American review table in short story, there we also talked. There was
Yeah.
also terrible
Yeah.
things said about Grant. Anyway, I just want to go on the record. Yeah, I think, in Grant, Three Cheers to Grant just had a story come out or accepted or come out in Black Cat. And so it's funny when you put it that way, Ted. Like, aren't we fortunate that we are able to place our work now and then? And it still remains somewhat mysterious. We've talked about sometimes I think I've written a great story and nobody's interested, and then something I wrote in the course of a day, then somebody takes that right away. So, who knows? But isn't it great that we're out there in the mix? I mean, so yeah, it was yeah, just fun.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, very good. I don't know, Grant, do you have anything you want to follow up on any of that stuff or?
No, I love Brady's last comment because it is true. I mean, all it takes is one editor. But I just want when I got that story in Black Cat Weekly, or got it accepted, I knew it was something special. Like I had kind of a breakthrough with it. I can't really explain it, but I knew my writing had taken another step forward, and it kind of scared me because it's like, can I do this again? Like like wow, can I achieve this level of like artistry again? And I feel like I can, but I had a couple of months of doubt after writing it. It kind of scared me, and I didn't write for a couple of weeks because I felt like that's never going to happen again, because it's like playing the guitar, like and suddenly there's a jump, and then you plateau for a long time, and then there's a jump, and that's kind of how writing is for me. But it scares me when those jumps happen, and I'm afraid I'm going to fall back to what I was doing before, or I'm never going to I'm never going to achieve what I just did. Like, how many people write a Death of a Salesman? You know what I'm saying? Like, you write Death of a Salesman, then, well, the Crucible, it's kind of overrated. But View from the Bridge is pretty good. The Price is pretty good. But did Miller ever write anything as good as Death of a Salesman? Did Williams ever write anything as good as Streetcar? You know, Cat and Hot Tin Roof's pretty good. Sweet Bird of Youth's pretty good. But so that's the kind of thing as an artist that freaks me out a little bit. So anyway, just dealing with my own anxieties, but just sharing with you. So Black Cat Weekly, I'm super excited that they took the piece and that I'm in a really fine journal. But I'm also it scared me a little bit. So I don't know if that's good for our listeners to hear, but
Well, no, I get that. And again, this is going to sound probably a little egotistical, but I have that happen a lot where I'll look at something I wrote previously, or, it's been accepted. So now it comes out. So now I'm proofreading the galleys or whatever. It's like, oh my gosh, this is really good. I don't know if I can write this well now,
yeah,
and it really happens with academic writing because I look at some of my academic writing that's really, I'm just going to say it. It's really sophisticated, and I'm drawing on all kinds of really sophisticated sources. Like, I don't, I don't think I'm capable of writing like that, but I was 6 months ago or 2 years ago. I had the editor of Genetic Joyce Criticism or something. It's this online journal that publishes James Joyce stuff. And he had read an article or a paper that I post on academia.edu and invited me to start submitting to their journal because he liked it so well. And that was really, a boost to my ego. And I thought, man, I kind of like to do that. And so then I started reading this paper that he had read. It's like, man, that's really good. I don't know if I can write that again. I don't know how I wrote it in the first place. And so, yeah, it just happens. I mean, I guess if you just keep after it, it'll happen again. But
yeah,
man, and I think it's because so many times, especially in academic writing, but maybe in creative writing too, so much of it is kind of in our short-term memory where we've got all this material. And then after we get away from that project, that stuff all kind of disappears. And I remember when I wrote my comp exams for my PhD, and you're getting feedback from anonymous readers, blah blah blah, and one dude complimented me on my use of James Joyce's critical theories and so forth, and I literally had no recollection of having read them, let alone incorporating them into my response. Yeah, I mean, I just chucked so much information, and I went and did the exams, and then it just 99.9% of it was just gone. So I don't know, Brady, you've obviously done a lot of academic writing too. Do you ever look back at previous stuff and think, man, I was one smart cat. I don't know if I'm still that smart.
Oh, well, I don't know if I was ever that smart, but I will say that it is true. So, in the last few years, recent years of my career, I've been increasingly interested in narratology, but also, and I know you guys heard me talk about this before, um, talking about literature and literary analysis in terms of quantum physics. And when I look at the stuff I published an article, a novel, like that was a really big deal for me. And so getting geared up, it just seems almost impossible to get to that level, to bring into play all that knowledge and all those sources and weave it together and make your argument and make your case. And so even as I'm going into retirement, there's a couple of articles yet in the quantum series that I want to get to, and it's a little intimidating. So yeah, I feel I understand exactly what you're saying, but I would say too, it's kind of the same um, with the writing of fiction. One of the things, and I know we've talked about this, but this is also, I think, good practical advice for our auditors. I don't like losing touch with work. Like even if it's just half an hour a day, I got to keep touch because somehow your brain or the connections and thoughts, the way the thing is working, somehow it shrinks in your brain if you get too far away from it. So I don't like losing touch. If I'm working on a story, working on a novel, then I have to keep in it. I have to keep the brain going, and then all those connections are made. There's discoveries. There's possibilities. The thing takes on a life of its own. But if life intervenes and you have to set it aside and you have other commitments, then you can lose that, and then it's really hard to gear back up again.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I kind of did a bonus episode about this on my own a while back, but I talk about the fact that I think a lot of younger writers or less experienced writers, or however you want to say it, might give up too soon on a project because they start working on it and they don't know where it's going, and is this any good? Blah blah blah. Meanwhile, they start thinking of other projects that they want to work on. But I think if you can kind of stick with a project and let it keep kind of marinating in your brain, your gray matter or whatever, your brain pan, that things will start to kind of coalesce, and you'll start to get a clearer picture. I've been working on this Edgar Allan Poe inspired novel for quite a while, but particularly since the beginning of this year, I've really been focused on it. And again, I didn't know what it was about, and I thought it was going to kind of be one of these stories, and it's not really that. But working it away, I've gotten a much clearer sense of what I think this story is. I mean, I'm still not quite there yet, and I've got a long ways to go. I'm only 40,000 words into it, but a much clearer, better, more positive sense of the work now, certainly than in January when I kind of got back to it after being away from it for a while and so on. So, Grant, you write your books so quickly. I don't know. Do you
I
get
think it's the
that
I think it's
slip?
the thing Brady was talking about. I write my novels in about 40 days. Sorry to get all biblical on our listeners out there in virtual land, but I yeah, I get so immersed in the world, and my mind's just clicking like crazy, and I just got to write every day when I'm writing a novel and stay in it, and things keep surprising me and happening. So I a friend of mine once said, you're one of those guys like in the 1950s, you'd be holed up in an office working on sketch comedy show and just typing away, for hours. I said, yeah, I would have loved to have been like on the, Sid Caesar show or something like that. I would have loved to have done that kind of writing. But yeah, that's why my mind works. I'm reading crime stuff all the time, and that's feeding the lake of ideas. But when I get into novel mode, it's the same thing with a short story. Like right now, I'm working on one, and I need to write every day when I'm in it because everything's fresh and it's that short term memory thing. Just at least I find that's how it works for me. Just like what Brady was saying, And coming back to the academic thing, I've gone back over old seminar papers, and I'm like, who wrote this? Like it's so immersed in the theory that we were. And I'm throwing around words like hegemony, and it's like, oh yeah, that was Carrie Nelson's class back in 89 or whatever. That was Ramona Curry's class, and I got all this feminist film theory talk that I'm using, and it just doesn't feel like I know that person anymore. I won't say that about my creative writing. I always feel like I go back and I know that person, but I don't know the stories as well as when I was in the hot white heat of doing it. And that's to me part of the exciting thing of crafting something is being in that white heat and you know, not letting go of it, staying there, staying in the room and just get that damn thing done. That's my process anyway.
Well, I'm curious, it's funny. All these years, I've never asked you this, but how when you write, like you say, we write every day when you're in the throes of writing a novel or whatever. How much time per day do you devote to it?
It depends. Some days it could just be an hour and a half. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 hours. I never go more than 4 or 5 hours. I find taking a break's a good thing, and then I'll go for a bike ride or something. And as I'm riding, I'll be rethinking about what I wrote, and I'm like, oh, I should have mentioned this. Oh, there's this. Oh, and then I'll go back. So the next day, my writing might start with a revision of what I wrote the day before. Instead of writing forward, I might write backward and then go forward. But I'm constantly in it, and a trick I learned from somebody, and again, everything I'm saying, you got to figure out what works for you. But a trick I like to use is to end at a good place, like where I know what's going to happen next, or I feel what's going to happen next. But I'm going to stop now because I know tomorrow when I pick it up, I'll be ready to go because I kind of have an idea. Instead of quitting when I don't have any ideas, I like quitting when I have an idea because I'm not going to lose it. It's not going to go out the window, and it'll be a good starting point for tomorrow's journey. So that's kind of a trick I've used for a long time. The other trick I use is I'll set time limits. Like I'll say, I'm only going to write for 2 hours, and then that speeds up the process. I don't allow myself to get too cerebral and criticizing myself. It's like, come on, Grant, you're knocking off at noon, so let's go, babe. And that really helps.
Well, that's really interesting because I don't. write anywhere near. I mean, I write every day, or I focus on my writing project every day, but it's like half hour, 45 minutes. And then my typical morning is I'll read for a little bit. I'll write for a half hour, 45 minutes. If I'm really on a roll, maybe an hour. And then I write by hand, in a notebook. And then I stop and I get my Chromebook out and I type that into my Chromebook and Google Doc or whatever. Eventually that gets transferred over to a Microsoft Word document. But so that's another, I'm a pretty good typist. So that's another 15, 20 minutes maybe, depending on how much I've written. And maybe I'll do some little light research that maybe I refer to something or want to double check something. And so I'll do that. So I spend maybe an hour, hour and a half on that whole process each morning. But that's it. I don't spend any more time. So that's one of the reasons why it takes me 3, 4, 5, 6 years to write a novel. Right. And some days I've just written a paragraph. I mean, that's all I've written of a given day and so forth. But I don't know if that's because, for so many years, for 30 plus years, I had to get up like at 5 o'clock in the morning, walk the dog, get the kids up and going to school, blah, blah, blah. And so I was lucky to get a 30-minute or 40-minute writing period kind of squeezed in the very beginning of the day if I got up super early. And so I don't know if my brain is just now trained to only be able to write for 30 or 40 minutes, even though now I've got all the time. I could write all day if I had the energy and inclination. But yeah, well, that's really interesting. Brady, what's your? Oh, go ahead, Grant.
I'm just going to compliment what you said, though. Like, that's okay. It works. It works for you. I wouldn't beat yourself up. I mean, you write great stuff. And so your process, my daughter and I will and I've shared this with you guys. We'll get together. We do virtual writing twice, and it's been really great. We started COVID and we've been doing it ever since. Twice a week we get together, we say hello. And then she's in Denver, Colorado. I'm here and we're doing our thing. And I'll maybe like in an hour pound out 1,200 words. 13. She'll pound out 200 words because she's so meticulous about every word she writes. But she writes really great, and she got a piece coming out in Harper Pallet. Check it out; it's coming out in April online. Nice. So anyway, about RAGBRAI and anxiety. So it works for her. Whatever your process, who cares? If as long as you're producing art. There's no right or wrong way,
Yeah, I'm not self-critical. I think I'm doing good stuff.
You're damn good.
Yeah, it's just a very different. And I tell my students I emphasize quality over quantity. I've maybe only written a paragraph, but it's a pretty solid paragraph that I produce in a given day. So Brady, what's your? And you and I are more in line in terms of taking a number of years to write a novel, I think. But in a given writing session, what's a typical amount of time, do you think?
Yeah, no, just to go back, I share with Grant, and Hemingway said this too, so in Doubly Good Company, but stop when things are going well. Right. When you know where it's going next, then you just get to pick up. But yeah, my process, I think, is maybe a little bit different, probably much closer to Ted's. So I revise pretty thoroughly the work from the day before, the couple days before, first in the morning, and then break into new stuff. So I don't make a lot of progress each day. It might only be a page or two. And so 2, 3 hours in the morning. That's a kind of ideal day, and then go for a walk in the afternoon, head for the mountains. So yeah, but it's got to be every day.
I've talked about this before here and there, and I think probably during our podcast at some point. But there are, of course, a lot of mornings where I write. I get to I hit the wall after 30 or 40 minutes. I know I'm ready to be done for the day, but I know where I think I want to take the story or where the story is going. So I do make some notes to myself. So the next day I kind of start from there. But there are some mornings too, where I've kind of finished whatever scene or thing I'm working on. And so I'm kind of starting, even though I'm still in the same story or novel or whatever it is, I'm in a different place. I don't really know quite where to go. And so I'm kind of starting, from scratch in a sense. And I have felt over the years that I do the best writing on those mornings that start from scratch, where I just start putting words on the page and then suddenly things start to happen. And as opposed to, okay, I've got a pretty solid idea, so I know, okay, so I'm going to take my character. He's got to go to the kitchen now, so I'll take him to the kitchen now. And I've kind of theorized that on those mornings that I have a sense of where the thing is going, and so I start with that my conscious mind is more in charge of the writing process because I know where I'm going. And on those mornings where I'm kind of starting from scratch, it's my unconscious mind that starts to generate the ideas. And I just find that those writing sessions, in my estimation, tend to be more creative, more interesting, have more tendency to be more experimental. And maybe I'm completely off the mark there, but that just seems like these two different aspects of my creativity. One is actually a little better at writing, and it's the unconscious mind, and it's the mind that sort of dominates on those days I don't really know for sure what I want to do. Does that
Well,
seem to hold water at all?
yeah, I wonder, Ted, if like in Crow Song for the Stricken, if some of that mysteriousness and changing of the mind isn't reflected in the mysteriousness of the stories. I mean, as I was listening to you talk, I was calling back the stories, the cycle in Crow Song, and there's such unexpected turns and mysteries and things that you feel are about to be said, but then something happens, and so you're left with that kind of wonderment, and in that particular case, a certain degree of fear or anxiety. So I wonder if it's actually if the reader is experiencing some of your writing ways in their reading. I don't know. As I was listening to you talk, I was putting it together with my reading experience of Crow Song.
Well, that's interesting because the way I wrote that novel, I wrote the first story, which is the title, Crow Song for the Stricken. And I mentioned in that story, just off the top of my head, that there was something weird happening with the next door neighbors, the Abernathys. But when I wrote it in that story, I had no idea what that was going on with the Abernathys. So when I wanted to write another story, I thought, maybe it'd be interesting to find out what's going on with the Abernathys. So I wrote a story about the Abernathys and figured out what's going on at their house. And that became Plains, which is another kind of ghost story. And so that was kind of every story like suggested something that then gave me the path for the next story to write that all ended up being this, kind of strange novel or whatever. And I kind of did a similar thing in The Strophes of Job, which is a prequel to Crow Song. But yeah, I let the writing itself guide where the next part was going to start. So yeah, maybe the mystery I was experiencing as the writer kind of filters into that. I don't know, Grant, do you have any thoughts on that whole process?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. One, I'm real big on structure, but I don't mean by structure to over determine the artwork. But I do know, at least for me, when I go into scene work, if I decide to show a scene, that a window's going to get closed and another one's going to get open. That's just part of the narrative cause and effect. So there's this scaffolding. There's a skeletal form that I'm hanging my words on. So that gives me and then I just follow impulse. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what characters are going to say, but I do know that a window's got to close and another one's got to open, or a door's got to open, or otherwise my story's dead. That's just there. So for me, there's always a little bit of structure involved, but there's a lot of free. It's like hockey. I mean, we could go into a forecheck, but if I get the puck, I have all kinds of options. I could try to beat someone one-on-one. I could, throw it around the boards. I could get it to the guy in the center. I got to make quick decisions. And as a writer, it's constantly making those decisions. And the more you write and the more success you have, the more confident you become in following your impulses. Like, for example, the play I was in, I was word perfect. So the first play, every word was exactly what Mr. Simon wrote. Now, did they come out perfectly every night? No, I'm a human being. I'm going to make mistakes. But because I was so word perfect, those moments where something threw me and I suddenly felt like I didn't know the lines, I just opened my mouth and out came words, and they were pretty close to what they were supposed to be. And I think of that analogy as a writer. You put in the prep work, about sort of rules of narrative. You got these file cards in your head, and then you start writing, and you'll surprise yourself because you've prepared yourself. So it's impulse and preparation, I think, is the key for me anyway, as a writer.
Yeah. Well, looking at the old clock on the Chromebook here, we probably want to switch gears to our featured short story. Our loyal viewers and listeners know every episode we have a short story that we talk about from a recently published literary journal. And going back to the Bennington Review for this one, we've done other Bennington Review stories in the past. It's a really great journal, I think. They do this weird thing where they don't list the contributors' notes in the journal, but give you a QR code to check them out. So I don't know. There's the QR code if anyone wants. But I'll talk about the author of the story that we're gonna discuss here. But this is Bennington Review. This issue is titled "All the Words," and it's issue number 14. They've since published issue 15, which I haven't gotten a hold of yet. But this is from issue 14. And there's about half a dozen really strong short stories in this issue. But I wanted to share this one with you guys, see what you had to say about it. It's called Tempting Fate, and it's by Elizabeth Hart Bergstrom, who, again, I'll say more about. I guess she goes by Liz, so I'll say more about Liz in just a few minutes. But as I do, I'll read, well, they're kind of short, so I'll probably read the first couple of paragraphs and then, give a brief synopsis, trying not to give too many spoilers, and then find out what you guys think of Tempting Fate by Elizabeth Hart Bergstrom. Yeah, okay. So here's how it begins. After the clock tower in the town square strikes midnight, I sneak out of the house. Trying not to wake my grandparents, I tiptoe over the old floorboards that creak and groan. At least we don't have a dog who might bark. Our lanky black cat and our notch-eared calico are chasing a moth in the hallway, but they pay me no mind. On my way out, I pick up one of grandmother's cookies from the kitchen. Every Sunday, she bakes thin ginger cookies in the shape of hearts. She says if a cookie breaks into exactly 3 pieces in the palm of your hand, your dearest wish will come true. If it breaks into 2 or 4 pieces, then all will come to ruin. So I press my finger against the center of the heart, and it shatters into a dozen pieces and spills crumbs onto the floor. Feeling sheepish, I sweep up the mess with a brush and dustpan, then I button up my coat and put my plan into action. All right, and so the main character we find out is a 16-year-old girl named Annabelle, and her plan is there's an old woman who lives in this town known as Fate, and it's a personification of, or one of the sisters of Fate. She tells us this Fate does that she has 2 sisters, etc. And so Annabelle goes and visits Fate. And so a central issue, I think, in the question, or in the story rather, comes up, is it better to know your fate and what's going to happen to you, or is it better to sort of live in ignorance of the future and et cetera? And so that's kind of a debate that Annabelle and Fate have with each other and so on. And I don't think I want to say too much more beyond that in terms of introducing this story. So let me now turn to you guys. And Grant, let me maybe kick it over to you. What did you think of Tempting Fate by Elizabeth Hart Bergstrom?
I loved it. Just come right out, say right on Front Street. Yeah, I love the voice. I love how it's in that tradition of tales or fairy tales or folk tales or whatever tale. I don't know. I mean, Russian, whatever. So, and I thought you gave a really good synopsis of aspects of the story, Ted. And even that opening image. And again, I'm not big on symbols. That's so high school, right? Well, the chrysanthemums means this one thing. Get out of here. But anyway, the cookie right from the start, throws the whole story into dissonance, because we know by having read this story that it's neither a 3-piece break or a two or 4-piece break. The cookie is shattered, and so there is no answer. There is no, and that's going to become one of the through lines to the story: knowledge, knowing the future. But then you can also wash it clean by jumping in the river. And is that an option you want to take? So anyway, I thought the image of the cookie sent us into a wonderful maelstrom of where we're going to go on this on this journey, and it's I don't know. I don't know if metaphor is the right word, but it's something I've always believed in knowledge. I'd rather, and I've mentioned this on our show before, if I was in the Garden of Eden and I had the opportunity, I would bite the apple. I don't want to be innocent and not know things. I don't want to live my life not knowing what pain or suffering or what joy or anything is. I want to know those things. I want to feel those things. And so, um, but do I want to know my future? Would I have liked to known it at 16, 17? And no, I don't. I don't think so. So there is a part of me that wants to be ignorant of, and blissfully so. But I'd love the story. I'll stop there. I'll let Brady say a few words, and I'll chime in with some other things I like about it. But that's my initial reaction. Is I was really intrigued by it. And it was really interesting because we had to postpone our podcast last week. And I'm thinking from now on, I am going to read the story as soon as I get it from Ted. And then I'm going to put it aside for a week and then reread it because it was really a lot of fun having read it a week ago, preparing for the show, and then letting it percolate and then rereading it this morning. And so I discovered new things. And yeah, just by having that gap time. Usually I always read the story 2 or 3 times before we go to air, but it's always within 24 hours. This time I kind of let a week elapse between, and it enhanced my appreciation for the piece. But Brady, I'd love to hear from you, and then I'll chime in with some more things in a few minutes.
Yes, Brady, take it away.
Yes, yeah. If I was in the Garden of Eden, even if the serpent was telling me that's where knowledge was, I still wouldn't. It wouldn't even occur to me. Um, I still would. I still would twig to what was going on or why I should be interested. Like I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, I'm the category there is hopeless, hapless. So tempting fate. I don't suppose I loved it maybe as much as Grant, judging by the reaction, but I enjoyed it, and like Grant, really enjoyed the folk tale quality of it, the kind of lightness of touch through it, and what I like maybe most about the story is sort of wonder if we sometimes have a feeling that life has a kind of inevitability about it. Like we go along and we know that life is chaos and creation is chaos and there's randomness and we're not in charge of anything and stuff happens, but yet isn't the path, isn't it already drawn? Wasn't it set in motion at the moment, that beingness, that the cosmos came into being? Isn't there an inevitability? And so the story asks, if you know your fate, can you change it? And that so I had a lot of fun in thinking about what the story is asking us. Yeah, and I like the kind of folk tale, and I spent a lot of time in my own brain in the last few days. I had read it before, as Grant had, wondering about the differences between folk tales and fairy tales and what is implied by those different terms. So this was yeah, a fun, mild read, not as maybe as daunting or as heavy as some of the other fictions we've been reading, even as it is about very serious issues. Okay, I'll stop talking.
No, that's all great. Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about as I read this story, especially in context of our last episode, where I mentioned a literary journal after dinner conversation that prides itself, its mission is to publish short stories that have very definite moral and ethical issues kind of at their heart. And we talked about the fact that, a well-written story is going to have those things kind of baked into it anyway. If you put them front and center, I don't know if that's such a great idea. I think this is a good example. I think that this, and it's not a new issue that this writer brings up. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of, writers through the centuries that have talked about this, the basic idea of, do you want to know your future or don't you want to know your future? And what are the, pros and cons either way. So it's not a, not wholly original concept, but I think the way that she gets at it is very artfully done, and it's very definitely a moral kind of ethical issue. And when you put it in the context of our 21st century, technology, because I'm just, more and more I'm seeing things about how as AI or whatever maps the human genome, et cetera, that there's just more and more, realization that our lifespans and what's going to happen to us medically and so forth is really written in our DNA, and all the good living, bad living, et cetera, that we do doesn't really seem to have a lot of bearing on how long we're going to live and so on. And so would we want to know that? Would we want to know at age 16 that we've only got another 10 years before some horrible disease, shows itself or whatever? And so I think even though it's set in sort of an unknown, kind of an old-fashioned time period, it's very relevant to today and issues that we're dealing with today and so on. So I don't know, but Grant, you said you had more to say. Is there anything that you had in mind kind of dealing with any of that, or feel free to take it in a whole different
No,
direction if you want
just
to?
a couple of things. I love what I was getting a Russian vibe. Maybe it was just the Kai wolf. I don't know, but this big giant wolf coyote that she rides near the end of the story, and I think it's some of the Russian stories of wolves coming to town, and then Willa Cather picking up on that in I think it's My Antonia in some of the. So I was getting a bit of that vibe, and I definitely got what you were saying. That's why I was nodding my head like a marionette over here. The morality thing I thought was really intriguing about the story because I didn't think it got in the way of the story, and I do think there's place for morality and it can be handled deftly. Like I just read there's a series of books put out by Wayne State University Press by Milestone. They call it the Milestone series, and it's about television shows. And I read Barry Keith Grant's a little monograph book on the Twilight Zones. I just read that in the last couple of weeks. And he basically talks about it as each episode was a morality tale. And it really was. I mean, Rod Serling told great stories, and he had, Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont, and I'm forgetting there's another guy that oh God, I can't remember his name. The guy kicked the can was his story. Philip Nolan, I think, something like that. They wrote several of the stories, but they were all morality pieces. One critic at the time said that Rod Serling was like a tight-lipped rabbi, coming out and giving us the submitted for your perusal,
With a cigarette.
Yeah, with a cigarette, right? And so this story definitely had that vibe of an old-fashioned tale with a moral to be told, and I loved how you were riffing on that because I didn't even think about the DNA connection. Do I want to know that I might, because of a certain gene, have full-blown diabetes? But I don't want to know that. Or my wife wanted to know because her mom got Alzheimer's like at 55, 50. Like she wondered if she had some kind of, yeah, because her mom didn't live to 60. So she was concerned that she have like this gene too. And her sisters were worried about that, and the breast cancer gene. Like it just, I don't know. So anyway, I liked how the story was dealing with that, and I liked how it didn't give an easy answer. Like, do I want to like jump into a river to no longer know, but then I'm going to lose other things? And then there was like this analogy to aging, like, well, you're going to lose parts of your memory anyway, and then the river's going to take there's things you're going to forget. And that was a little spooky to me. So, but we've talked about this before. But the story was written. And Brady was suggesting it too, and kind of like this clean, easy to read prose, and yet there's really something deep going on with what the story's addressing. And I love writers that can pull that off. Simple elegance, like a great three-chord rock song, but within that complexities, and that's what I felt about the piece.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Brady, do you have anything you would want to add to any of that, or just take the conversation elsewhere?
Oh, well, no, I'll go back to the DNA. Wouldn't it be great if the current research is true? Because I'm really tired of like trying to eat well.
Yes.
And
Tell
also,
me about
like,
it.
if one more person says to me, or the world says, like, don't have a sip of rum. Like there's so few things in life that are, that are helpful at a particular moment given the stresses of life. Like a little sip of rum now and then is really good for the soul. But it turns out it's poisonous. Yeah, but maybe it's not, depending upon, like, maybe your fate is already written in your genes and you can just relax and not. So the world can stop yelling at me to eat my vegetables. Uh, yeah, no, everything that Grant about the story, everything that Grant said. Yeah, as I'm just repeating myself too. It's deftly done. The touch is light and yet gets at, and I like the gag of the three sisters,
Yeah,
the Fates,
yeah.
right? Like that's just funny. Like the story won me over, like at that moment for sure. When Fate says, "Oh, I'm out of touch," we had a falling out with the sisters.
Well, yeah, I was about to remark about just, little humorous touches here and there, even though, again, overall, it's a pretty serious minded story. But, Grant already mentioned the 7 foot koi wolf that lives in the backyard. And, and I love that this is, for everyone at home, 185, 186. He sleeps near my cabin because I feed him and we've become fond of each other, but he's his own animal, says the old lady. And so Annabelle says, is he friendly? Only the people he likes, she says. He doesn't like most people. you know um, the other thing I would bring up about this story is and again I know I kind of touch on this oftentimes in the stories we discuss, but even though it's this sort of fairy tale folk tale kind of world, and it's not a place I definitely recognize. I mean, there are elements to it that I recognize. There are still these very human elements that I definitely can relate to. And the thing that really, later in the story, and I hate to give too much away, but what the heck, Annabelle is told that she'll fall in love with this woman who's a librarian. And for a time, they'll have this kind of torrid love affair, but then the woman will fall out of love with her. And so for months, Annabelle will try to win her back, by placing little love poems in the books that she returns to the library, that kind of thing. I mean, not that specific detail, but boy, I think it's pretty common. I think a lot of people can relate to that one-sided love affair, just aching, to try to get someone to be, back on board with being with you, and it's not working out. And so even though it's this kind of fairy tale world, it's very human kinds of things that I think a lot of people can relate to, which I think is also a talent of the writer as well, to embed a sort of fantastic story in many ways with such real and such, sort of probing kind of human moments. I don't know, Grant, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think you nailed it right on. And I mean, I think that to sort of write a story that feels like an allegory of some kind, but then yet to have these moments that really ground it in. Because I've been there. I mean, my first really serious girlfriend said she fell out of love with me, but then we stuck together, still dated, but I kept waiting for things for her to fall in love with me again, and that was a loser cry deal, babe. I mean, I was so immature and so like that wasn't going to happen, and so I'm just like waiting around for this magic to strike, and so yeah, there's those kind of painful admits that I find interesting in fiction. And I wondered like what happened with her mom. What's the backstory there? Did she find out something she couldn't handle? And what was it? Um, yeah, it's just that's the trick. How do you tell like a Aesop's fable or Grimm's fairy tale, but then put in these moments of connection with audience that goes beyond just the morality tale, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Brady, thoughts on any of that, or?
Yeah, no, you guys have, yeah, said it all. The matter of the librarian. I mean, it's a nice little micro argument that you don't want to know your fate, because if you know those things, you would never get up in the morning,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like life is gonna run you down for sure. And if
Well,
you knew them, you would just wrap yourself in pillows and duct tape
It
and
reminds me of like
hope for just
like
stay in bed.
some of those religious arguments that I could never wrap my head around. Like I consider myself a religious person, but those, well, there's predestination, and I'm like, but there's free will. I mean, I don't understand. Like, well, it's all planned out, God's plan, but then there's, and then it's like that's what always like it was a paradox to me. It would blow my mind, and there's something like that going on here, predestination, and it's like, well, is it? Does that really exist? I mean, like I get to me, I don't believe in that. I guess what finally comes down to it, I'm more an existentialist than the idea of a like I think we make choices every day and we can change our lot and we can change things moment to moment. But it's some religious thinking. There's this whole so anyway, I thought that those complexities in the story were it reminded me of like reading, I can't remember what T.S. Eliot thing I read. It wasn't any of his the ones everybody talks about. It wasn't the wasteland and it wasn't the hollow man. It was something else for I don't know, but it's
four quartets.
yeah, some you could read on this religious
Four
level is one way,
quartets.
and then and I'm like and I remember like reading analysis of it, and it just was beyond my comprehension in terms of the way I see the world. So yeah.
Well, boy, I could take this thread and run with it, for
Go.
so I won't. So I won't because I wanted to. I want to share some stuff about Liz here in just a second. But I did want to make this point. I think it's a very teachable kind of thing, and sticking to our lesson before writing. And I could make a reference to the Master William Gasp at this point, but anyway, no, Brady. I actually was reminded of a journey to Al Ramel at this point in the story, in a very specific detail. Towards the end of the story, Liz, the author, puts in a line from a Neruda poem in Spanish and doesn't give us any context whatsoever. And I know a little bit of Spanish, but apparently not enough to figure this line out. And so I ended up looking it up, and so that kind of thing. But here's the thing: I think a lot of times when writers try to bring in, another language or something like that, they think, well, boy, I better give some help to the reader, the non, in this case, the non-Spanish speaking reader to know what the heck this is talking about. But this writer doesn't. She just puts it out there. And if you want to go look it up, you can. And obviously, Journey to Al Ramel is filled with quotes in French, generally speaking, that you don't give any help with whatsoever. And I don't think I ever talked to you about this, but one of my ideas for the paperback edition was to maybe go through and give the English translations of those. And I thought, if he wanted to do that, he would have done it in the first place. There's no reason to do that in the paperback. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that practice, and maybe why you decided you would just put all that French into your novel with no help whatsoever for the non-Franco speaking readers?
Yeah, I mean, in the case of A Journey to Al Ramel, because it puts so much pressure on the reader, it was just another form of pressure on the reader. But also, in that case, it was this journal or excerpts of other people's journals colliding with the narrative of the protagonist, and so there was no mediating consciousness to explain things. It was all on the fly, and so I thought it was truer to the experience of the book. And after all, the protagonist is French, and yeah, so for all kinds of reasons, it seemed the right thing to do. But Ted, as we have discussed, in the future, there will be no books like A Journey to Al Ramel coming from my computer to yours to go out into the world. So yeah, it asks a lot of the reader.
Well, I guess now I'm curious if I had run that up the flagpole and I had said to you, hey, what about in the paperback and the Kindle, we give like the English translation somehow or another, either right after it or in some kind of a footnote at the end or something. Was I correct in thinking that you would have been opposed to that?
Yeah, no, there's no way. Yeah, nope, nope. I mean, people like I think of it this way too. People are on their own in life. Like we are all, I mean, we have our friends and we have our family, we have our collaborators, and so we can gather input from others. But mostly we're on our own, and the world exceeds our ability to understand it. There are more languages, and so all of that kind of spirit seems to me fair. Like you know, you're in life, you're sink or swim, or you know, bob along the surface, whatever, however it is you proceed, you're on your own, and so in that way, it seemed kind of honest too. And so yeah, I wouldn't, yeah, no translations, no footnotes. You're on your own.
Yeah.
Well, that seems to me to be a trend that I see in literature anyway. Like I think about it, North American Review and other lit mags that I've read and novels where like 30, 40 years ago, people would explain with an adjacent. So like you'd say, I don't know, I want to make sure I get it right, like chi-chis or something, and you're talking about breasts or tits or whatever. And you would put it right there, right after it. And people don't do that now. I just had a Spanish speaking student. She's American, but you know her parents are Mexican, and the she had a lot of Spanish, and but she didn't bother to explain it, and context often would explain it. Or you know, I got my computer open. I just type in various things. Oh, that means skin and bones, or oh, that means you know. I didn't need to have the English word right next to it. And it feels like it dumbs it down a little bit to me. And it privileges English language as somehow like above other languages. Like just as I think we're moving away from italicizing international words, um, I don't think we need to be explaining, you know, like Brady, what you wanted to make it harder on your reader. I also think it's just kind of a trend I'm seeing in publishing in the last 30 years. I mean, if you look at Sandra Cisneros' earlier work and look at what she's writing now, the early work she would often do that, have the adjacent English word right next to a Spanish word. But now she doesn't do it. So, you know, I applaud you for not dumbing it down.
And I applaud me for knowing you wouldn't have dumbed it down. So, hey, let me, before I forget, let me give a little background on Elizabeth Hart Bergstrom here. And actually, her website is a little hard to read on my phone. So, if this is a little bit clunky, I apologize. But she's published a lot of short stories, poems, essays, that kind of thing. Stories appearing in Bennington Review, of course, Indiana Review, Juked, Passages North, other places I'm having a hard time reading. And essays have been published in New York Times, Michigan Quarterly Review, Catapult, elsewhere. Poems in Uncanny, New Orleans Review, Sycamore, The Offing, Pank, which I've also published in. And then it goes on to say that Liz's essay, A Funeral for Two Birds, was listed as notable in the Best American Science and Nature Writing 2020. And their flash fiction convenience store, Prayer, was long listed for the Wigleaf top 50. And then it just goes on and on with all sorts of publications and accolades. And so she's really doing some great stuff. And then adds at the end of the bio, they are a queer, chronically ill writer who was born in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia on Mannequin land. They are currently seeking representation for their memoir and essays. And Liz also posted a video from YouTube that they had done reading from an essay that was published in what sounds like a really interesting collection. I'm not going to that, so I'm not reading it here. I'm just kind of going from memory here. But it's a collection of photographs and essays and poems about, all from queer authors and kind of like the clothing that they wear. In other words, kind of the outward, I'm guessing kind of the outward appearance that they kind of gave to the world, especially maybe before they came out and that kind of thing. So Liz has a really interesting essay in there about wearing this red sequined dress to this event when she was a teenager and that kind of thing. But it's a really interesting video because they do such a nice job of reading their work. But it's also very interesting because it's from 2020, and Liz looks very different in that video from their author photo on the website. In fact, the author photo kind of reminds me of how Liz describes the librarian in her story. And so I don't know. It's just a funny thing. But I think you know, women are better able to do that, really change their appearance drastically through hairstyle and makeup and clothing, whereas guys tend to kind of always look the same or whatever. But anyway, sounds like a really fascinating writer, and I really enjoyed this story. And as the website says, they're looking for representation. So any agents out there, check out. I think it's LizHartBergstrom.com, something like that, but easy enough to find online, obviously. So I don't know anything about Liz's bio that stands out to either of you, and otherwise we probably can go around the horn for any final thoughts. Brady, anything in particular you want to comment on, or are you ready to kind of speak in general?
Yes, let me speak in general. First, a shout out to the Hazelnut. She was just in Chicago this weekend. A sort of dystopian speculative fiction, a short story that she wrote had been accepted for an anthology, and the anthology had a publication celebration, and so they had brought her out to Chicago, and she read, and so I'm awaiting more details. So I'll be able to brag more on my kid next time, I hope, if that's okay with you guys. But just by way of closing thoughts, then, other than three cheers to my kid and to Grant's daughter too for publication. One of the things thinking about over the course of today's conversation and thinking about the mass of humanity and the energy at AWP, like that actually, it doesn't have the effect of discouraging me, and it oughtn't to have the effect of discouraging a young writer. Like go out there, get into the mix. There's the world, right? Out there, there's the world. Do your thing, tell your stories, write your poems, write your essays, write your hybrid literary works. Give it a try. Send your work out when you're ready. Yeah, jump into it. Why not? What do you have to lose?
Absolutely. Yeah, good point. Grant, final thoughts or anything specific?
Uh, I love the rousing cry that Brady gave there, and I support that in theory. But but I'm a person whose social battery runs low when I'm around too many people I don't know. It's just how I am. Like I love getting up in front of people and doing a reading. I love being on stage. But you put me in a room, that's a whole different thing with a bunch of people coming up to the table to start talking. That makes me real uncomfortable, but that's just me. So yeah, that's I go to a department meeting and afterwards I have to take a nap. I mean, I just my social battery is not that. I'm not a depressed person, but I find it hard being in a room with a bunch of people. It's just I've always been a shy person, and it just exacerbates that when I'm in those environments. Like when I'm in front of a class, I'm controlling the events. Yes, it's improv, but it's structured. And I provide the structure. When I'm on stage, I have a script, and the other actors have a script. So we're kind of got a blueprint for what we're doing. But somehow getting out at AWP with 13,000 people, that just sounds daunting to me. So I get my work out in the world, but I'm not sure I want to be out in the world with 13,000 people. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to continue this too much longer, but one of the classes I'm teaching right now is that an undergrad class I've been teaching for a couple of years, where it's about helping creative writing majors and so forth develop websites and social media, so forth. And a lot of them find themselves in a real conundrum because they want to be out in the world. They want their writing to be out in the world and
Yeah.
being read, but they themselves are not very keen on the idea of being on social media and having a website. And I don't know. So it gets very complicated because I think a lot of writers do have a more introverted personality, which again then makes it a little more of a challenge to try to get yourself out there into the world. So anyway, all right. Well, I'm going to end with that note, and I really appreciate you guys finding some time. I know this has been a difficult month in a lot of different ways to do that, but we'll try to get together in a month or so. Again, I got my my grand opening of my book coming up April 20th and 21st, my reading from Aspiring Child with the fine folks in Islamabad. I know you guys have lots of exciting stuff going on. So thanks to our readers, or not our, well, those two, but our listeners and our viewers. And thanks to Liz Bergstrom for a really interesting story. And we'll hopefully see everyone down the road.